Why does your forehand flick have no power? Because you are just brushing or grazing the ball. You're making contact by brushing it. A flick like that is a gift to your opponent, which is how many players get beaten. And so, you end up thinking the flick itself is useless. In matches, most forehand short balls you receive will have light backspin or almost no spin. A truly heavy backspin serve is easy to identify. Therefore, on your forehand, you must be proactive with techniques like the side spin flick, side spin push, or push flick. You need to incorporate tactics. The most difficult footwork in table tennis is covering the short forehand and the deep backhand. Once you master your short forehand game, your backhand baseline defense will become incredibly solid. This is why learning the forehand short game is mandatory. You cannot avoid it. While it's possible to flick a backspin ball, the shot will have no quality. It's a low percentage shot. Flicking it without quality is just setting your opponent up for an easy attack. Amateur players make too many unforced errors because the consequence of losing a single point feels small. If the stakes were higher, I guarantee more players would play cautiously and strategically, just as I'm advising now. You must use reliable, high-percentage techniques. The stable techniques we teach will allow you to win at any age. Otherwise, your game will depend entirely on being in good form. You should not flick a heavy backspin ball. If you try to flick for speed, the ball will go straight into the net. Your only option is to flick upwards for arc, which is the equivalent of popping up a high ball for your opponent. You're better off pushing it. Even if you push it a bit high, it's better than serving them an easy smash. Another type of ball is the half spin, half no spin ball. This kind of ball is perfect for flicking. When flicking these light spin balls, the main principle is to drive forward and slightly upward, meeting the ball aggressively. Against a light spin ball, my first choice is still to treat it as backspin, as spin variation is what separates skill levels. First, challenge your opponent's ability to handle backspin. If your opponent's backspin loop is too strong or too spinny for you to handle, then you can switch to treating the ball as topspin. To handle backspin, you can use techniques like a long push, a short push, a side spin push, or a slice. For light spin balls, prioritize backspin techniques first. If you find that this becomes too passive, then switch to an offensive topspin return. First, try to draw errors from your opponent, then focus on your own topspin attack. The third type is a pure sidespin topspin ball. If you push it, it will pop up high. If you do a long push, chop, it will go out of bounds. For this reason, the best way to handle a pure sidespin topspin ball is with a flick. It's the ideal shot. This shot allows you to generate both speed and quality because you don't need to create upward arc. You can drive straight through the ball to produce power. So, amateur players must learn to differentiate. If it's pure sidespin topspin, flick it. If it's a light spin ball, try pushing first. If that's effective, continue. If not, switch to a flick. For sidespin backspin balls, your primary technique should be the push. Now, let's talk more about the flick. Starting with the one for light spin balls, which requires creating distance for your stroke. There's also another type, the push flick, executed very close to the ball. Here's my advice: handling light spin balls requires creating space. But for a heavy sidespin topspin ball, that same space will cause errors. Therefore, the push flick is a more stable option. First, let's teach the conventional flick that requires an open stance. The key to a good flick is this: if you master the flick, you will learn how to properly open up your forearm for all your shots. Analyze your own flick. Is your arm cramped and bent? Or is it properly extended? Why can't you generate power in your strokes? It's because your forearm approaches the ball at a slanted angle, which in turn causes you to be too close to the ball. The correct technique is to angle your body at 45 degrees and open up your forearm. This is how you get both the necessary distance and the quality in your shot. The same principle applies to your forehand drive or topspin. Don't play with a cramped arm. Open up to generate power. This isn't about a big backswing, it's about extending the forearm backward to find the correct contact point. It's the same for the flick. Your forearm should be opened up, not tucked in at a cramped angle. This is why many players can't flick correctly. Many amateurs have this same cramped arm problem on their forehand drive. This flawed stroke structure makes it impossible to generate power. Power comes from properly opening up your forearm. Why isn't your forearm opened up? Because you're lifting your elbow. This leads to a flick where your elbow is high and your hand is low, forcing you to lift the ball. The correct way is to keep your elbow down, which allows the forearm to open up naturally. Keep your arm opened up. Your racket face should be pointing straight ahead towards the table, not to the left. Penhold players often find this easier because their grip allows for more freedom in adjusting the racket angle. The flick motion should resemble a fish's tail, swinging back and forth. Open up to the side and execute this swinging motion. Your elbow must stay down. The motion involves no upward or sideways forearm movement, only back and forward. The explosive power comes from this crisp action. This is how you generate real power on your flick. Why can't you generate power now? Because you are just brushing or grazing the ball. You're making contact by brushing it. No matter how fast your arm moves, it's still a brush. A flick like that is a gift to your opponent, which is how many players get beaten. And so, you end up thinking the flick itself is useless. If you can execute that fishtail swing, your opponent won't even be able to keep up with the speed. The common mistakes for amateurs are standing too close and always moving the forearm upward. The correct motion is to open up and drive forward. This applies to light spin balls as well. As your forearm drives forward, your wrist will naturally add a slight upward motion for arc. That's all the lift you need, no extra forearm lift is required. Too much upward forearm motion will either send the ball long or result in a weak, brushed shot. In table tennis, you must learn to direct your forearm upward, forward, or downward depending on the shot. You can't use an upward motion for everything. Defense, flicks, and drives all require different paths. Learn the correct path for your forearm. Think of the fishtail motion. The faster you execute that swing, the more explosive your flick will be. Just a simple backhand forward motion is enough to produce a high-quality shot. So, where does the power come from? What part of the body is generating force? In a real match, the motion must be much more compact because you have to be ready for the next ball. The power comes from your wrist. You open the wrist on the backswing and snap it forward on contact. Some players think it's the fingers. The fingers help transfer the energy, but the primary power source is the wrist. This is what we call a high-quality, aggressive flick. Let me demonstrate. I believe the forehand flick is a mandatory skill for all amateur players, as everyone who knows how to play will serve short to your forehand. The second type of flick is the simpler push flick, which is mechanically very different from a standard flick. For the push flick, the closer you are to the ball, the better. You want to press the ball. This is the basic racket angle you'll use. Make sure you get very close to the ball. The name push flick tells you the motion. You push into the ball first, then flick it. This means your power must be generated late in the stroke. For this shot, you cannot create space. Creating space is for balls with less spin that you are confident in attacking. This is the same principle as receiving backspin. For very long, wide, or heavy spin pushes, you must use a compact stroke with late-stage power generation. The flick is no different. If your opponent's hook or reverse pendulum serve is so effective that your pushes pop up and your flicks go long, you must use the push flick. Your first priority is to get the ball on the table. Neutralize the threat your opponent has created before you think about adding quality. The essence of the push flick is, get close to the ball and use late-stage acceleration. Step 1, find your contact point close to the ball. Step 2, on contact, lock your racket angle and use your forearm to push forward. Your wrist must not move. When I've taught this before, players who moved their wrist ended up flicking the ball off the table. The push flick technique has no wrist action. A common bad habit for amateurs in the short game is taking a secondary backswing after getting into position. For example, they'll step in, then pull back their arm again before pushing. The same thing happens with the flick. They get in position, take a big backswing, and then hit. This is the source of your unforced errors. Your backswing must be a single, fluid motion. Avoid any secondary backswing. The rhythm is always 1-2, never 1-2-3. Many amateurs make this mistake. They take a second backswing on their serve return and commit an error. That secondary backswing creates unwanted momentum and timing issues. What kind of ball is good for a push flick? Light spin balls, short side spin topspin, or any ball that has a mix of side and top/backspin. It is not effective against pure, heavy backspin. Remember, no secondary backswing, and get very close to the ball. Get close, then flick. Push, and flick. Press down on the ball, keep your forearm and wrist firm, and drive forward on contact. For example, if you're leading 10-5, you can go for an aggressive flick on a light spin ball. But at 9-9, you must use the safer, more reliable push flick. In my opinion, amateur players should never go for a high-risk shot on a crucial point. Professionals often have to gamble on crucial points precisely because their opponents are too consistent to make easy mistakes. But in amateur matches, you should wait for your opponent to make the mistake, because they are nervous too. Even if you return a slightly high ball, they might miss it under pressure. So don't test your high-risk skills at that moment. Don't fight to get to 9-9 only to lose the point on a wild flick, loop, or smash. It wastes all your hard work and ruins your mentality for the next game. Play for stability. Play smarter. At 9-9, I might push flick the ball wide or jam them in the middle to force an awkward shot. Then prepare to attack the next ball. Going for broke is a strategy for professional athletes when they are evenly matched and have no other choice. It's for when both players are at a very high level. Remember, for the push flick, absolutely no wrist movement, and keep your racket angle closed, pressing down. Many players have a flying elbow because they incorrectly use their elbow to adjust their racket angle, lifting the elbow to close the face, and dropping it to open the face. This is wrong. The correct posture is, keep your upper arm pointing down, your forearm level, and then use only your wrist to adjust the racket angle. Rotating your wrist down closes the racket face, lifting your wrist up opens it. You must use your wrist for these fine adjustments. The relationship between your upper arm, elbow, and forearm should remain stable. Don't lift your elbow to close the racket face. This is a very common problem. Many players can't loop a backspin ball, and when I tell them to close their racket angle, they do it by lifting their elbow. Of course you can't create arc that way. You must keep your elbow down while closing your racket face. This allows you to use your forearm to lift the ball while the racket angle imparts topspin. If your elbow is high, it's mechanically impossible for your arm to create the proper arc. In your forehand stroke, the upper arm should always stay down. The forearm starts level for a basic drive, is raised for a high ball, and lowered for a backspin loop, with varying degrees of backswing. You do not adjust your racket angle by moving your elbow. The elbow and shoulder joints must remain stable.